A very warm welcome to all of you to the Blub World Web Talks 171st episode. We'll be talking about, can teenagers really solve global problems?
When you're talking about teens, there's, I think, a couple of dynamics that are at play over here. One is just the global demographics that you basically are seeing changing. They've changed a lot over the last little bit. They're going to change significantly over the coming years. And that's one dynamic that is going to definitely play out in different ways in different geographies. So depending on what geography you're looking at, you're going to have a very different, population of teens that you're looking at. And that is going to influence their ability to shape things.
Violence in today's scenario, in today's environment, is something that's starting to grow. Frustrations are creeping in, mental stress is going up, the divides between people are increasing. And you see people losing their patience very fast. The concept of empathy seems to be disappearing from this world, and I think that becomes an important issue.
A lot of problems are there existing, and if we focus on these problems and if we tell them, the teenagers, that this is the problems and are you having the solution of that at the beginning, and we want to know the clear idea about the problems, global problems, and how they think, what are their perceptions, how they deal with such kind of problems. And if we know their opinion, I think so they are, they will be doing miracles.
Whenever we are talking about global issues that actually are affecting human life, how do you do it? I would say that, one has to look beyond the classroom situation. Learning cannot be only inside those four walls, whether they are small children or whether they are grown-up children. There are different kinds of challenges which come, and even small children, they can solve it.
I think the most successful organizations, the most successful leaders, the most successful outcomes derive from combining the wisdom that comes with experience along with the dynamism and creativity that comes with youth. And I think when both of these forces can be channelized together, that's when you get the greatest success.
Age is not a bar or a barrier to solve problems or to understand problems. And with that very note, we can really understand that any age, any child has the ability to solve problems.
A very warm welcome to all of you to the Blub World Web Talks 171st episode. In the last 170 episodes, we have interacted with nearly 3,000 plus school leaders from across the world. On this very platform, they've come together to share their ideas, opinions, innovations, and what all new are they doing in the education space. नमस्कार, आप सभी का स्वागत है ब्लब वर्ल्ड वेब टॉक्स के 171वें एपिसोड में। पिछले 170 एपिसोड्स में करीबन 3000 से ज्यादा स्कूल लीडर्स इस प्लेटफॉर्म पर आकर अपने इनोवेशंस, अपने आइडियाज हमारे साथ शेयर कर चुके हैं। एंड अगले 60 मिनट जो आप हमारे साथ हैं, उसमें हम आप सबसे जानने की कोशिश करेंगे दैट हाउ इज एजुकेशन एवोल्यूटिंग। शिक्षा कैसे कैसे बदल रही है, उसमें क्या क्या नया हो रहा है विद द पर्सपेक्टिव ऑफ द टीनेजर। आज 13 से 19 साल के बच्चों पे हम बात करेंगे और ये समझने की कोशिश करेंगे कि इस पूरे इकोसिस्टम में वो कितना बड़ा डिसीजन मेकर है, एंड मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंटली उसकी डिसीजन मेकिंग कितनी क्रिटिकल है। Thank you so much all the guests for joining us today in the 171st episode. We'll be talking about, can teenagers really solve global problems? Now, the reason behind asking this question is very simple. We want people to innovate. We see a lot of startups around us, but when it comes to critical decision making, we always need somebody who has a lot of age in the pocket to take those decisions. So are we really ready to accept the dominance of experimentation over experience? Or is it still the same way that it was for so many long years that we've been seeing political, critical, educational, all sorts of decision making in the education ecosystem? So once again, a very warm welcome to all the guests. Let's start talking about, can teens really solve global problems? Let me welcome the first guest for today for their opening statement. A very warm welcome, Mr. Vipul, Redey, the product manager for Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, a TED-Ed innovative educator from the US. Vipul, over to you for the next 3 minutes for your opening statement on, can teens solve global problems?
Thank you. Thanks for unmuting me. A couple of thoughts around this. I think when you're talking about teens, there's, I think, a couple of dynamics that are at play over here. One is just the global demographics that you basically are seeing changing. They've changed a lot over the last little bit. They're going to change significantly over the coming years. And that's one dynamic that is going to definitely play out in different ways in different geographies. So depending on what geography you're looking at, you're going to have a very different, population of teens that you're looking at, and that is going to influence their ability to shape things. The other thing that I would consider as sort of also another, and this is not going to be geography specific, I think it is just to do with the fact that that is just the nature of that age, is the ability to work with something that's completely new. And I can talk, and during the course of this conversation, I'll bring up a couple of examples, but probably the closest example I can bring up within my lifetime is the onset of the dot-com boom, which was basically shepherded by teens. It was largely people in their teens and their 20s that made all of that happen, because they had an open mindset and they had the creativity and the ability to ask the question, why not? And execute on those dreams that they had. Not so much with older demographics that we saw. And given that a lot of change is coming in the pipeline shortly, I see that as being one of the things that really would work in the favor of teens being able to make those changes in the world that we hope that they can.
So you think that teenagers can absolutely take those decisions and take the world forward? You quoted the dot-com, what we can say the bubble, or typically the complete lifetime that people lived and understood the internet across the globe, but introduced us to the internet, or the dot-com boom, because it was driven by teenagers. लोग जो अपने करीबन 20 साल तक की उम्र में थे, उनके कहीं ना कहीं यूजेज पैटर्न से वो पूरा बूम जिसको आप कहें या जो बबल आप कहें, वो उनके परसेप्शन, उनकी यूजेज हैबिट्स और उस वजह से खड़ा हुआ. दुनिया ने उसको एक्सपीरियंस किया और वो एक ऐसा आप कह सकते हैं एक्सपीरियंस था which was typically coming from teenagers. So we have seen proof of the pudding. लेकिन अब आगे वो कैसे change होगा, क्योंकि now we are looking for something that will teens really be making a lot of positive change as well. क्योंकि केवल getting into the commercial space, putting out a startup, does that really impact a lot us socially and in the positive aspect of it? This is something that we need to understand more. Now let's talk to somebody who is handling a chain of schools. और इतने सारे schools के अंदर जब इतने सारे बच्चे ideation करते हैं तो बहुत सारा friction भी होता है and बहुत सारी अच्छी innovations भी होती हैं. And he's somebody who has been advising us in a lot of our ventures in many different ways. A very warm welcome, Mr. Vinesh Menon, the CEO for Education, Skilling and Consulting Services for the Ampersand Group from Mumbai, Maharashtra. Vinesh, over to you for the next 3 minutes, and a very warm welcome.
Thank you so much. Am I audible, I hope? Thanks so much. Thanks, Anand, Daksh. Thanks, Blub World. I think you folks come out with pretty good topics. And once again, this is a very pertinent topic and definitely something that must be discussed. Yes, we as a group have been dealing with a lot of schools, not just in the private space, but also in the public space. We have also been able to, be interacting with a lot of teens who belong to government schools. So I think let's define the global issues, right? Since we talked about global issues and global problems. And if you really go the traditional way and just try and understand what are the global issues that exist today in this world, if you read all the, if you go into the United States Nations records, there are about 10 or 12 of them which are probably very pertinent and common across. You have, of course, climate change, the fact that the temperatures are rising, glaciers are melting, flora and fauna is getting affected. That's a big one that a lot of people talk about. Food insecurity, I think, is another very, very important global issue. I think there are more than 800 million folks who are, malnourished today across the globe. Access to clean drinking water, access to sanitation. This again is a major issue that keeps getting talked about. More than 2 billion people apparently are unable to access this. Child labor still exists, and I think to a large extent this is connected to education or the lack of it. That again becomes a very important global issue. Violence in today's scenario, in today's environment, is something that's starting to grow. Frustrations are creeping in, mental stress is going up, the divides between people are increasing. And you see people losing their patience very fast. The concept of empathy seems to be disappearing from this world. And I think that becomes an important issue. Poverty is an important issue. Terrorism is an important issue. Child marriage is an important issue. Wildlife conservation. Now, to all this, I've added at least 3 of them, which are my personal top 3. Digital divide is becoming a big global issue. Fake news is becoming a big global issue. And alignment to health in the early stages is becoming a big global issue. Now, before I move on, I just want to give a couple of examples which probably will help me, decipher or rather explain what I'm trying to say here. And Vipul will resonate with what I'm going to say now. There's this famous Ken Robinson experiment of this child, of this little hair clip, which was given to a 3-year-old child and a 5-year-old child and a 10-year-old child and a 12-year-old child, asking what all can you do with this hair clip? And the younger the child, they gave far more examples of what you can do with it. You could use it as a fishing line. You could use it as a, bridge to get two things together, whatever. And as the child got older, there was only one use for it, which was the hair clip, right? So clearly, the child in its early stages or early years are far more dynamic in their thinking. I also remember reading a book by Douglas Barry called "Wisdom for a Young CEO," where a 14-year-old child apparently wrote letters to all the famous CEOs of the world, McDonald's and Sprint and Viacom, asking them what are the qualities to become a CEO. Again, it shows the child's mind to want to know more. So I think teens clearly have the energy, they have the creativity, they call a spade a spade. They are much more well-read today. Uh, I think they clearly have it in them to be able to be more confident. They have an attitude. They can, but to expect them to change the global issues today in the way that we're talking about, I don't think. I think that's a tad too much to expect. Can they influence them? Can we navigate their thoughts towards that? Yes, probably we can. And therefore, I think I would believe that I think there are a few points that I believe we should be all doing now. You have these sporadic teens that you keep meeting. I met a teen in a flight who, was into teach India, and after school or college rather, he used to go and teach, folks in the interior villages. Now, I've seen a teen who's 16 years of age who wants to make a big difference in the gaming industry and wants to. So there are a lot of these examples, but to see this becoming a wave and making a change, I doubt it. I think we as adults should start making the first step to their environment, the parents, teachers, that should start getting them exposed more to what is really the global issues. We need to have platforms to spot, groom, nurture kids as they grow up. I mean, just like what happens in the IPL, you nurture kids right from the beginning and you start getting them onto the world stage. I think you need to use our country's heroes, the folks who are in the sports arena, the folks who are in the performance arena, even ex-corporate czars like Indira Nooyi, who's done a lot to change the way health habits are to be changed in Coke. Use these folks. They need to come forward and make that little difference. And I think I've lost my 3 minutes. So there are many such examples. What I'm attempting to say is that yes, they can become an influencer. Yes, they can make a change, but no, they're not ready for it. And if we want to wave, I think we need to put our first step and change the whole process of changing them.
So teens can influence, they can absolutely initiate the change, but can they really solve a problem? This is a question that comes from somebody who has been handling teens across the spectrum, whether it's public schools, whether it's private schools. क्या हम teenagers से बहुत ज़्यादा expect कर रहे हैं when we tell them to solve problems, or is it the right expectation and we are not preparing them the right way? ये एक question ज़रूर है जिसका हमें बार-बार answer ढूंढना होगा कि are we really giving them the right kind of exposure, the right kind of training and the right kind of content ताकि वो problem solvers बन सकें. हम उस उम्र में नहीं solve कर सकते थे. क्या इसका मतलब ये है कि ये भी नहीं कर सकते? Let's try to know it from the next speaker who comes from the higher education space. कि हायर एजुकेशन स्पेस में जब बच्चे आते हैं वो थोड़े से डिसीजन मेकिंग में बेटर हो जाते हैं, उनका थॉट प्रोसेस थोड़ा सा बदल जाता है. क्या उस समय तक उनकी मैच्योरिटी में चेंज आया है? Can we still rely on them for solving problems and not just influencing global change? A very warm welcome, Dr. Krishna, the President of Pacific University from Udaipur, Rajasthan. Krishna, over to you for the next 3 minutes. A very warm welcome.
Thank you very much, Daksh. Mr. Daksh, thank you very much. And I would like to congratulate for organizing 171st first this web talk. And really, the topic is really very relevant. And now the time has come where we would like to discuss more about teenage people. And really, when I have gone through a lot of papers and I've studied, and what I observed that really teenagers have that kind of capabilities. Whatever the Vinesh, Mr. Vinesh and Mr. Vipul, they rightly said that a lot of problems are there existing. And if we focus on these problems and if we tell them, the teenagers, that this is the problems and are you having the solution of that at the beginning? And we want to know the clear idea about the problems, global problems, and how they think, what are their perceptions, how they deal with the such kind of problems. And if we know their opinion, I think so they are, they will be doing miracles. So Daksh, you have rightly and chosen this topic. And I personally feel that, when you see the Malala Yousafzai, when you see the Kelvin Doe, and when you see the Greta Thunberg, all people have, in their teenage, they have done a lot of things, and they put a leadership to the all the leaders in front of them, that these kind of challenges are there, and we do have the solution, but they need support. Because if we see the trait of the teenagers, if they fight with emotions when they come in the age of 13 or 14, 15, 16, 17. Normally they do have the hormonal changes. They want they want to make a lot of friends in the teenage field. They want to prove themselves. The career is in front of them. So all kind of things are in front of them, and they are struggling with such kind of where they want to prove themselves that yes, this kind of world where we want to exist, and we should know, our name should be known to everyone. So this kind of things they are facing, and out of them they are having risk capabilities. They can take a lot of risk if we talk about these young people. So all this kind of, if we see and we combine all together, and we make the relation with correlation with the global problems, yes, fighting with all these issues, they are coming out from them, and proving themselves in front of others. So I think so marvelous they are doing. They're putting their 100%, they are proving themselves. And when they come at the age of 18, 19, 20, you will find mature personality come in front of us. So yes, they do have all kind of capabilities. We have to nurture them, and we have to imbibe all kind of inculcate all kind of cultural values in front of in between them. And I think so we will come out from the scenario. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Daveji. And you talked about the hormonal changes जो उस समय हो रहे होते हैं बच्चों की, irritability, and उस सारे emotion और उस सारे changes को रखते हुए, can they still be doing changes? And most importantly, can they do some positive impact in the world around them? So now let us know from somebody who again comes from the school education space, and उसमें भी एक ऐसे area से जहाँ और ऐसे institution से which has a very long legacy and has given India some of the most amazing, I would not say most amazing, but some of the most dynamic political leaders even. So a very warm welcome, Ms. Bhattacharya, the Secretary General of Shikshayatan Foundation from Kolkata, West Bengal. Bhattiti ma'am, over to you. And आपके लिए I think we have a very specific question. इतने सारे बच्चे एक कैंपस में जहाँ पे आप KG to PG पूरा का पूरा इकोसिस्टम हैंडल करते हैं, do you really feel that if you give the teenagers the right kind of power and the environment, क्या वो कुछ positive change करेंगे या negativity बहुत बढ़ जाएगी? So over to you, ma'am. A very warm welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. And good morning to everyone who are present here. I've been listening to everybody. Yes, we are handling children who are at the age of 3+, and they are continuing till post-graduation. But 2 of the campuses are together, but the other 2 campuses are not together. But we are basically dealing with about 10,000 students. Your specific question, yes, can the teens solve a problem? I feel that yes, teens can solve a problem. They need to be part of a decision-making process whenever we are talking about global issues that actually are affecting human life. How do you do it? I would say that, one has to look beyond the classroom situation. Learning cannot be only inside those 4 walls, whether they are small children or whether they are grown-up children. There are different kinds of challenges which come, and even small children, they can solve it. I'll just give you an example. Like we are talking about digital divide and digitalization. When we started with digitalization, we actually used our small children to actually go and solve a problem, because parents would be all coming to pay their fees, in person. And we thought, this was a security problem with so many parents coming in a campus where we have more than 8,000 students. So how do we solve that? We actually had made videos for children. We taught the children how they would be teaching their parents to handle, digital issues, how to pay fees through digitization. And I think that solved the problem. And when I'm talking about going beyond the classroom is solve small problems. We are talking about climate change. We are talking about sustainable development. We are talking about environment. Our school and college, maybe it's huge in the campus, but when you are walking through that narrow lane, we have immense problem with, traffic, with vehicles coming in. How do you solve that problem? How do you solve a parking problem? There are vendors who are selling food, which, people are, there is smoke, there can be fire, there can be other environmental issues. We can involve children to take decision, go to, every vendor, go to the, neighbors and solve a problem. Because if we are talking about global issues, they all start locally. If we are doing, these puja and other things, and if you're throwing flowers and, spoiling the water, we ask the students that what do you do? Today, you may have people who are in front of maybe a temple begging, and these children can also solve such problems as to why are these people begging and why, they are dirtying the place. How do you clean up the place? How, these homeless people can be given education. So every issues that was told by the other speakers, I'm sure you can look at from, 6 different ways. You have a problem, you have an issue. Now we ask the children, how do you solve this? Let us observe how other people do it. We call it a best practice. And okay, maybe our country has its own local problems, but definitely we can also see best practices, how different countries have solved it. So we have international exchange programs, we have local exchange programs, we have community development program, where we are sending our children to actually help community people and also help them to learn to educate themselves. We are learning from other countries, how they are solving their problems and trying to see what we can actually use in the class. In fact, I must tell you, during this COVID time, we saw that our own children had formed a group to solve how they could actually help out people when they were getting attacks of COVID. And they formed a group of more than 500 people. And these 500 people were all, put together, where each one of them were trying to solve problems. They had made a group, they had given their contact numbers, and wherever, they needed any kind of help, these children would actually see and reach out to people. So I'm sure what I'm trying to say is that learning cannot be within 4 boundaries of the wall. It has to go beyond, which Tagore had spoken long time back, and you have to take it beyond the classroom, have experiences, small experiences to solve problem. And I'm sure once you make them part of the decision making, whether they are small children, whether they are also children like who are doing in a business school, who are part of our business school, and they had done their internship last year, solving local issues. They did not have to go and solve another corporate problem, a problem which is very much local. They solved that, and that was their internship which they did. So I think.
Thank you so much, Bharti ma'am. The time was actually over. So, but I think you gave a very good, idea about how can we stimulate them कि आप उस environment में उन्हें वो जगह दे दीजिए कि वहाँ वो decision making में involve हो, problem solving में involve हो. बहुत बड़ी problems ना solve करें, छोटी से शुरू जरूर कर लें, and that could be within the school space itself. And उसके अंदर when you talk to these many teenagers, तब वहाँ पे इतनी energy को channelize कैसे किया जाए, उसका एक अच्छा तरीका है. But I think we need to get into a little more hands-on approach कि वो एनर्जी को आप और बेहतर कैसे चैनलाइज कर सकते हैं. तो लेट्स टेक द एक्सपीरियंस ऑफ समबडी who's right now operating or running the world's biggest school, जिसको हम सभी जानते हैं, Guinness Book of World Records में उनका नाम है, an institution which has a very long legacy, जिसके operations are have been exemplified by a lot of schools, क्योंकि जिस तरीके से उनके founder ने स्कूल को चालू किया, the approach that he had, the way he listed his own assets in public forum. So what do they think कि जब इतने सारे बच्चे एक साथ हैं, does the curriculum framework, does the current policy, and does our current HR structure allow us to give teenagers that kind of an environment? Over to Mr. Roshan Gandhi, the current head for the City Montessori School, Lucknow, one of the biggest schools in the world. Roshan ji, a very warm welcome over to you.
Thank you very much. I think global problems are incredibly complex, and complex problems require creative solutions. And as I think some of the speakers have already noted, the most creative people that are there are young people. I think the most successful organizations, the most successful leaders are, the most successful outcomes derive from combining the wisdom that comes with experience along with the dynamism and creativity that comes with youth. And I think when both of these forces can be channelized together, that's when you get the greatest success. If you look at the biggest, most successful organizations in the world today, they've all scaled up with mechanisms in place to ensure that, traditionally, if an organization scales up, it becomes very hierarchical. But the most successful, if you look at Google's and Apple's, they had mechanisms to ensure that the newest members of the organization, the youngest recruits, their ideas are always heard and brought to the table, and their creativity is harnessed at all levels. And that leads to incredibly successful outcomes. Similarly, with leaders in all domains, whether it's CEOs of companies or politicians even, the most successful ones are experienced individuals who have perhaps a very young dynamic team of advisors around them, and both of these forces are combined, and that leads to great outcomes. Similarly, in schools, what we find time and again is that the traditional mindset which prevails a lot of the time still is very top down, where it's about the principal and the teachers defining what should happen in the school and telling the kids what to do, and then the kids do that. And I'm talking about outside of just the academic sphere, but even when it comes to co-curricular activities and clubs and societies, those are usually driven by the administration of the school. But what we see time and again is that when there is a more progressively minded leader who really understands the power and the creativity that the kids have themselves, and they let that freedom into the space, things flourish. Kids come up with thousands of ideas between them. They work together, they collaborate, and they do really meaningful, valuable things. And I think, as adults or as people who are running various educational institutions, best thing we can do to some extent is get ourselves out of the way, not direct kids, not try to train kids into how to be entrepreneurial or whatever it is. I think they are creative. I think they have those tendencies naturally, and what we tend to do is sap that out of them by forcing them into boxes. And rather, we need to just create more and more space for them to do their own thing. And of course, we're always there to provide guidance and direction and steering and improve things. But otherwise, ideas should come up from them. And I think by doing that as educators, of course, we will empower these kids to grow into people who will become leaders in their respective fields. And that is what, ultimately leads to change. As the previous speaker was rightly saying, it starts in one's own community or in one's own sphere. And when more and more people are doing that, that's when real change happens at a global scale.
So if teens are given the right kind of environment, they can really innovate. And for complex problems and complex global issues, we need a lot of creativity. And I think children are typically the repository of all the creativity that humans have. Because अगर आप दुनिया भर की अभी तक की रिसर्च देखेंगे, तो it clearly states कि every 10 years your creativity comes down by nearly 30%. और आप जब अपनी प्रोफेशनल लाइफ के जेनिथ पे या टॉप पर पहुंचते हैं, तब आपकी क्रिएटिविटी खत्म हो चुकी होती है. आप उस समय केवल रिपीटेशन जानते हैं या उसको बार बार कैसे करना है वो आप समझते हैं. So are we, as people who are on the top of our own fields, are we the right decision makers for tapping into the creativity of these children? So let's bring in somebody who has been helping a lot of big institutions and rather education institutions raise fund, जिनको education में fund का flow समझ में आता है, and who himself is, हम कह सकते हैं इंडिया के फाइनेंशियल लिटरेट्स में से कुछ लोग, क्योंकि अगर आप स्टेट बाय स्टेट ये जानने की कोशिश करेंगे कि हमारी फाइनेंशियल लिटरेसी कैसी है, तो वो काफी खराब है। और जब आप किसी बच्चे को रिसोर्सेज के बारे में, पैसे के बारे में या फाइनेंस के बारे में लिटरेसी नहीं देंगे और आप उसे कहेंगे to solve global problems, would that really be right? Or would we be giving the right kind of platform to them? A very warm welcome to see Atual Thakur, the director of Anand Rathi Financial Services from Mumbai, Maharashtra. Atulji, over to you for the next 3 minutes and a very warm welcome.
Thank you, Dakshji. Thank you, everyone. Global problems and the issues around that, I think these are all big jargons. Let's just step behind and just try and understand why were child labor laws brought into, across the globe, various countries at various levels. That child was solving some problem, okay, for the household, for the neighborhood, and hence he or she was obviously missing out on their growth, their studies, etc., and the curve was bottom. But were they literally not solving a problem? I think that's not the right way of looking at it. They were solving their family problem, they were solving their neighborhood problem, and at a very tender age, which clearly says, and without education, which clearly says that age is not a bar or a barrier to solve problems or to understand problems. And with that very note, we can really understand that any age, any child has the ability to solve problems. If you want someone to become an Arjun, are you ready to become a Drona? That's the key point. The issue that we always face is that we want Arjun in every sphere, from our kids or from probably kid who is a 2-year-old also, but we don't understand that we are not Dronas. If you look at some of the spheres that where it is more free and any age group can participate, some of the best minds are the youngest players. I mean, if you look at the best prizes which have been won in any hackathon, they might be probably the youngest brains. Okay, whether it is the hackathon organized by the Google or the Facebooks of the world, or the darknet. So it all depends where you are looking at. If you look at the youngest Olympian, if you just Google it, she's a 13-year-old kid. The youngest cricketer in India is a 15-year-old girl. You name it, and you will have kids in this age bracket. The point is that they have been guided in a right direction. They have been given that open, free arm to go and pursue their dreams. They have been showcased a vision. Are we doing enough to really ensure that the kids around us get that? If we saddle them with the whole host of textbooks, it really doesn't make sense. I mean, we interview at our organization almost every alternate week young fresh MBAs and fresh chartered accountants. They might not be in their teens, they might be in their early 20s, but we don't look at their grades. What we essentially look at that is the problem solving ability. And sometimes you really feel that the guys who have the least grades are probably the guys who can solve the problems. I think I will pause over here. I don't know where my timing is, but I'll pause over here and over to you, Daksh.
थैंक यू सो मच अशोक जी कि हमें सबको अर्जुन बनाना है, लेकिन हम द्रोणाचार्य बनने के लिए तैयार नहीं है। पॉलिसी फ्रेमवर्क बहुत सारी किताबें दे देता है, उसके बाद में करिकुलम बहुत सारा वजन दे देता है, एंड फिर उसके बाद में बच्चे के पास में वो प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग बिल्ड करने की या इनकलकेट करने की जगह क्या हम उसे दे पाते हैं. सो आई वुड एट दिस पॉइंट द फ्लोर इज ओपन. अब मैं जो अगला सवाल पूछ रहा हूँ उस पे सभी जनों में से कोई भी जवाब दे सकता है, बट आई वुड टिपिकली वांट टू ब्रिंग विपुल इन. विपुल, यू हैव बीन वर्किंग इन दिस स्पेस एंड उसके अंदर आप बहुत ज्यादा टीनेजर्स को या बच्चों को एक्टिवेट करने के बहुत सारे इनिशिएटिव्स का पार्ट रहे हैं. डज द स्कूल इन इंडिया रियली हैव दैट बैंडविड्थ कि वो ये प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग इनकलकेट करवा पाए? I'm not talking with the idealistic point of view, the actual real practical point of view कि क्या सच में वो bandwidth है?
Bandwidth is difficult. You basically look at it from a couple of points of view. There is the amount of time that you would probably have to spend with the average child, regardless. It doesn't have to be just in their teens, even in the early ages, where in fact you have to spend a disproportionately larger amount of time. When they get into their teens, they basically want their independence, they want their elbow room, so itna time guzarna nahi padta hai unke sath. But having said that, I mean, you still do need to be able to spend time with them. Those that would be considered good teachers, teachers that basically are rated by students to be the ones that are sort of with, who change the trajectory of their lives. The amount of time that they had to spend with those kids to be able to affect that kind of change isn't huge. But the point is that, when they did those interventions, they knew that child very, very well. Not something that you really can do given the student size, the loads, the workloads that the average teacher in the average school will have, which basically brings, I think, a couple of possible solutions to bear. One, what can you do to help a teacher know a student better? What are the student's weaknesses? What are the student's strengths? How does the student behave in different environments? And specifically, what are the environments that bring out that student's best? Not something, again, that a teacher is like the average teacher would have the bandwidth to do, unless you start to look at, and this is where there's, I think, a lot of work happening, a lot of thought going in. I haven't seen a lot of, breakthrough successes really in that space, but a lot of work is going into using tech to do that, where you can basically have the data available at the fingertips of an educator to make that happen. The second thing, I think, which is basically significantly more lower tech and still isn't a lever that's pulled by a lot of schools in a half decent way, is using parents. A teacher doesn't have the time to basically deal with 30 kids, but there are 30 sets of parents and or guardians that are there at your at your disposal to essentially affect the same change. The number of schools I've seen actually that really will go the extra mile to really make meaningful use of that tool in their toolkit are almost zero. I think I've almost never seen that being something that
I think एक बहुत important claim यहाँ पे आ गया, क्योंकि 3 chain school owners से rather जो बहुत बड़े schools operate कर रहे हैं, वो तीनों जने यहाँ हैं. क्या आप लोग अपने scale पर पेरेंट्स का यूटिलाइजेशन सच में कर पाते हैं? Now this answer can come from anyone, Pradeep ma'am, Roshan ji या विनेश जी. And before I actually ask this question, आपके पास जो वो एक मतलब tapped in captive audience है पेरेंट्स की, क्या सच में वो यूटिलाइजेबल मेंटल स्टेट में हैं? बिकॉज़ विपुल सेड कि आप अगर वो यूज करेंगे तो हो सकता है यू कैन इवैल्यूएट. आई विल ब्रिंग इन अतुल, लेकिन आई थिंक विनेश जी वांट्स टू ऐड समथिंग. विनेश जी, क्या वो पेरेंट सच में उस मेंटल स्टेट में है कि आप उसे यूटिलाइज कर सकें किसी पॉजिटिव चीज के लिए?
No, I mean, I thought I'd let the others speak first, but I think what Vipul said is absolutely right. The platform is available, but I think we'll have to change the whole construct of this platform. I mean, the whole traditional PTAs has to give way to a very different kind of engagement, and I think that is what is required. Now, we also should not forget that there are a lot of conflicts that also exist. So there are these concepts of value education, for example, where you teach a child, the concept of not breaking a traffic light, not going on the wrong side of the road. Now, what happens if his own parent is doing that? And what happens if the child is with the parent who's doing the same thing? Now the child is in a conflict zone because the teacher is giving you something, the parent is seeing a very different, he or she is seeing a very different reality at home. So these conflicts exist and we have to solve that. So I think it exists today, but it's all at a self-initiative stage. To make this into a structured process and to create a kind of a real change to revolutionize this whole process will require a far more effort and probably even credit points, which has to get integrated into the curriculum and added to the marks. It has to have a kind of a policy shift at some point.
So, हमारे पास डायडेक्टिक अप्रोच तो अभी भी है, लेकिन वो पेरेंट को हम एंगेज नहीं कर पाते कि वो कहीं से इन्वॉल्वमेंट ले आए, और वो ले भी आए तो बेंचमार्क्स चेंज हो जाते हैं. टीचर के लिए एक बेंचमार्क अलग है, पेरेंट के लिए बेंचमार्क अलग है, और बच्चा कंफ्यूज हो जाता है. तो वो कैप्टिव ऑडियंस यूटिलाइज नहीं हो पा रही है.
Yeah, but since you asked about our respect to schools, it's not that we don't do it. All I'm trying to say is that bandwidth is stretched, and while we attempt to do it, is it making the required difference on a large scale? I doubt that.
तो बहुत लार्ज स्केल पे उसका डिफरेंस नहीं आ रहा है, बट एवरीबॉडी इज ट्राइंग टू डू इट. सो क्या यहाँ पे भी कोई सोल्यूशन या आइडिएशन गैप है? Bharti ma'am, over to you.
Yes, definitely. We, as I said right at the beginning only, that we do communities of practice. You see, overnight you cannot change everything, but you can do it slowly, when you are involving a community. Today we are involving parents. When we are involving parents, we are involving parents at solving every problem. Like if you take up health issue, we took up doctor parents, to, talk to other parents, when it comes from a parent to parent, I think people are receptive. And we are also going to different villages and other places where we are trying to solve, and we are also teaching the mothers and in the fathers. Like if you're going to see a Sundarban school, our business school is also looking at micro, how they can become independent mothers or independent fathers to solve their local issues also. So whether you're talking about health issues, you're talking about environment, you're talking about homeless people, you're talking about food, everything can be done at smaller scale, from local to region to national to international. And this collaboration is very, very important. Without collaboration, it is very difficult. So it can be, peer to peer. People have to solve it. And today we have digitalization, where you can actually across, region to national, where you can utilize. Now, just give me just maybe a couple of seconds. Today, we are talking about digital divide. Yes, there is a divide, but even with this divide, people who have the access, I think they should take it up and try to solve problems of who are not getting this. Give their phones to people. You may have 5 phones. You don't need that. The youth should solve, another youth's problem. If I don't need it, give it to someone else who need it.
So, I think Vinesh ji made a good point here कि वो empathy loss बहुत ज्यादा हो गया है इकोसिस्टम में. हमारे पास empathy कमी हो गई क्योंकि हम वो पढ़ा नहीं रहे in the values. I think Atul ji wants to add something. Atul ji, before you come in, एक ऑप्शन जो विपुल जी ने दिया था was कि हम पेरेंट्स की कैप्टिव ऑडियंस को यूटिलाइज कर लें हमारी बैंडविड्थ को बढ़ाने के लिए. बट हमारा इकोसिस्टम वो बहुत ज्यादा अलाउ नहीं करता, वो बहुत ज्यादा स्ट्रेच है ऑलरेडी, और पेरेंट बहुत बार कॉन्फ्लिक्ट एरिया में पड़ जाता है, तो उसको यूटिलाइज करना बहुत मुश्किल हो जाता है. अतुल जी wanted to say something on this. Over to you.
I'm coming probably from the opposite side, from the parents' perspective. In the last 1.5 years, it has been school from home and work from home. And if you ask a candid opinion from 90% of the parents, they will say that the quality of education in the last 1.5 years for my kid has actually gone down. Now, my question to all the parents is, why has it gone down when the child is actually studying with you? The answer to that is one of the three. Either the parent does not have the time for the child. Second is the parent is not intellectually qualified. Okay, they may have the best of the degrees, but they are not intellectually qualified how to teach to their child. Or the third is probably the parent is just not interested and they want to dump it on the teacher or the system. That's the proof of pudding. 9 out of 10 times the parents really believe that it's the job of the teacher or the institution to do it, because that's what they have been seeing over the ages. Now, if you see some of the Japanese schools, if I'm not wrong, or the Korean schools, the way they have the curriculum and their structure is that whether it's an offline school or online, I mean, online has just started, but in the case of offline schools, the parents have to actually get food every week on a rotational basis. The child has to, for the entire class, the child has to do a lot of work, and the parent involvement is always there. Not that parents over there don't work, right? In fact, over there, both parents work, but it's a culture that is to be built. So the entire ecosystem and the culture has to be built, and that's when things happen. There are some schools in India also who do it, but it's a matter of choice whether parents want to participate in that or not.
I think it's a very big behavioral change that we're expecting. क्या स्कूल के पास में उतनी ताकत भी है and इतने when you quote the Japanese schools, तो वहाँ पे it's a part of the culture, क्योंकि वो कल्चर का पार्ट है, लोगों की लाइफस्टाइल का पार्ट है, तो इसलिए शायद पेरेंट रेडी हो जाता होगा. विपुल, आई वांट योर थॉट्स अगेन ऑन दिस कि पेरेंट का कैप्टिव ऑडियंस तो यूज नहीं हो पा रहा, सो क्या तरीका और है कि टीनेजर्स को सच में वो टाइम दिया जा सके, डिस्प्रपोर्शनेट टाइम दिया जा सके टू बिकम अ प्रॉब्लम सॉल्वर?
So I mean, see, a couple of things. There's anytime there's a problem to be solved, there are certain sort of structural areas that need to be taken care of. You need to basically arrange for the money. If there's like legal aspects to that, you need to basically sideline some of those things, etc., etc., etc. So case in point, again, I'm going back to my .com analogy, right? A kid has an idea, starts a company, classic case of like, I mean, I've written code, it basically does wonders. It does this thing that nobody had even thought possible. And there's a whole lot of people that wanted to do this thing for them. I want to start a company. Okay. I need someone to basically incorporate it for me. Now that is something that an adult can do. I need someone to basically give me help in basically doing intellectual property protection. That is something that an adult can do for me. So we've had several speakers talking about the fact that, sort of, greasing sort of the system so that you basically have a smooth flow of this idea that goes from being just an idea to something that actually goes out into the real world and does something, does solves a real world problem, is essentially what you could do, where you take out some of these rough edges, you take out some of the grungy part of things, you take out some of these things that require experience and expertise, like years of experience and years of expertise. If those things can be taken care of by the adults, you can basically let sort of the creativity part of it be taken care of by some of these younger kids. It was a model that has worked time and time again. All of you are on Facebook. Facebook essentially came out of that kind of a environment where there were like two people that were asking, why not? And they just kept building code on top of other code that they built previously, which was built on other code that they built previously. And so basically that innovation part came from the teens, and all of the other stuff, was taken care of by the adults in the room, of making sure that this is actually a company that actually has a business model that is trusted by the adults, is invested in by adults, is something that basically holds true to its promise.
तो हम क्रिएटिविटी और इनोवेशन वाले एलिमेंट को आइसोलेट कर दीजिए एंड लेट टीन्स वर्क ऑन दैट. बट द बिगेस्ट चैलेंज दैट कम्स कि जब उस टीनेजर पे भरोसा करना होता है तो हमारे ट्रस्ट इश्यूज खड़े हो जाते हैं. वी ऑलवेज लुक फॉर सम ऑफ द अदर सर्टिफिकेशन. इतने अच्छे कॉलेज से है, देन लेट्स ट्रस्ट हिम. इफ ही इज फ्रॉम दिस इतने मार्क्स वाले बैकग्राउंड वाला है, तो देन लेट्स ट्रस्ट हिम. विनेश जी वांटेड टू ऐड समथिंग. ओवर टू विनेश जी.
No, yeah, thanks. I just wanted to, add on to what Vipul said, and of course, I think we should let the others speak too. But three things on my mind. One, we seem to be thinking of parents, schools, teachers. We should go beyond. What about media? What about platforms like TikTok and YouTube? So many youngsters want to become a YouTuber. They want to become an influencer. Now, what do you see on YouTube and TikTok? The content probably needs a massive change. What about creating a teen channel, a media channel only for teens, and making it as popular as some of the other channels that are going around today? Yes, we have got Model United Nations. We've got, and Daksh, you started a World Teen Parliament. It's a platform we're hoping will start attracting a lot of these kind of thoughts. But I think it's time to start exposing these folks through very different platforms. And we should look at, a teenager today we cannot push something into his head. Today's teenager has their own mind. They need to be given things which they are attracted to in any case. They're attracted to screen. They're attracted to content. Then that content has to go through a change. That's one. Second, I think it's also important to be a sharpshooter. You go into a government school and catch a teenager there. You don't talk to him about world environment problems. He doesn't care. There we should probably get into the whole sanitation, but availability of potable water, things which affect his environment and his neighborhood. Probably in the urban schools, we need to get into areas which have to do with population and vehicular traffic and some of the things that ma'am spoke about. And thirdly, I think it's high time to start, at least in India, I would recommend that, the kids from the urban schools need to go and spend X amount of time in the rural villages. They have to go to tier 2, tier 3. Now, unless we start understanding each other and the different parts of the country, this is not going to go away. We'll always be remaining in our little comfort zone bubble, not knowing some of the reality that happens there. And those kind of interactions must start for them to start thinking that this is a problem that's real and they need to start solving. So yeah, so some of those areas I just thought I'll add to the discussion.
Atul ji also had added one very important element कि जब आपने child labor laws आप लेके आए, when they typically came into existence, why did they come? उस समय भी बच्चा कोई ना कोई solution किसी ना किसी problem का तो कर रहा था. But as Vipul ji said कि आप उसे creativity या innovation वाले element तक थोड़ा सा limitize कीजिए and बाकी जगह पे उसको enable कीजिए ताकि वो child labor ना बन जाए, or rather it typically he becomes an innovator, he gets that space. So I want to bring in Roshan ji at this point कि जब ये space देने की बात को हम scale देना चाहते हैं, when you want to give space to so many teenagers, can that actually be done in the Indian ecosystem? Because यहाँ पे हर level पे, हर stage पे there is some or the other policy barrier that comes in जिसके साथ रोज लड़ना पड़ता है. Over to Roshan ji.
Absolutely, why not? I mean, when we're talking about an environment, at least an educational environment, people often ask me questions about this, like how do you do it at scale? Well, actually, it's the same thing that you do when it's a small scale or a large scale, because ultimately it comes down to individual teachers with their kids. It's not like me sitting in corporate offices, CEO is going to just make space or not make space. Of course, as leaders, we will shape the culture and influence the direction and make things that we want to happen in various ways. But ultimately, it's down to teachers at the grassroots. And I think there is a shift happening, and we can keep pushing that shift to happen. I think the pandemic has really helped with sort of a lot of traditional mindsets about education amongst educators, amongst teachers, amongst principals being shifted, and they're starting to see the power of the ideas that teenagers have. They're starting to recognize the different skills that teenagers have, because I think the board exam system has gone for a toss. The traditional metrics on which we used to judge whether a kid is doing well or not doing well are really struggling now. This year everyone was a topper. So no one is. So how are we judging what's actually who's actually contributing and who's actually being a good student and all of that? Teachers are starting to realize that there are other more important and better ways to do that, and they are engaging with their kids in different kinds of discourse. So I think it's a cultural shift that's happening. And we can continue to promote it. I mean, look, we need to also, as schools, provide teachers with the space and time to do that. We often overload teachers with so much pressure to complete the syllabus that they stick to the traditional things and they don't create opportunities for as much creativity as we would like. And so that's something we need to shift. I think there are changes in curriculum that are also possible to engage kids in different ideas. One thing that we are now starting a journey of is really, integrating global citizenship education into our curriculum. And that's something we've always prided ourselves on at CMS in terms of our events and extracurricular activities. We're often engaging kids in sort of world issues through those forums, but whether that translates into the day-to-day classroom or not is a different question. So that's something we're addressing now. How can we really alter the curriculum in such a way that world issues arise through the regular course of subjects, whether it's a math class or a biology class, or you can always be using relevant applied examples which are relevant to world issues that children can start to engage with, and the curriculum needs to then be built around that. The pedagogy becomes built around that curriculum with far more opportunities for project learning and experiential learning. This is a journey that we're beginning, and this will boost the creativity that we're looking for.
So I think the question has evolved and has gone through a journey that can teens really solve global problems? Yes, teenagers can. They can be creative. They can bring out some solutions, but still we don't really have a structure of doing it, and problem solving for us, for educators, for the school education space still remains an extracurricular activity. So can we really risk keeping it in the extracurricular activity? And most importantly, the biggest thing that we expect to happen so that problem solving becomes important is behavioral change. So can schools really initiate a behavioral change in the community around them? If you can, I think let's take the closing thoughts, because we are nearly at the end of this talk. Over to Vipul for his closing thoughts on Can teens really solve problems? That has evolved. Now, if they do, what's your suggestion to schools that do this right now and things will start happening? Give them one idea that they can take away from this talk.
Giving them agency. So when so I'll give you a case in point. Vinesh, I worked with when both of us were basically running a school chain, and at that point in time, one of the things that we were working on was basically requiring students to take an idea, any idea, and basically build some sort of an entrepreneurial venture out of it. And it doesn't, by entrepreneurial, it doesn't mean something that necessarily makes money. It could be basically something that is in service of your community. It could be something that is just a new art form that is sort of very much was very nascent and has started to really grow thanks to the efforts that these people did. Essentially, everybody had to look at some sort of an entrepreneurial venture that they could take forward. Kids loved it. Kids loved the independence. The kids loved the agency. Essentially, also what it did is it basically put the onus of equipping them to be able to take these forward on the schools, which made the schools think very differently, which made the teachers and the principals think very differently. And I think, if in some way or shape or form, if you can actually make something like that come across in a school environment, in our experience, that has been something that really worked very well. And so, would love to actually see how that plays out.
So giving students agency that you experimented within your chain schools की बच्चों को कुछ करने दीजिए, at least एक prototyping stage तक आने दीजिए, जिसपे Prakriti ma'am already gave an idea of community activities that they're already doing within their schools. Ma'am, over to you for your closing thoughts. But before you give your closing thoughts, आपके institution से अभी आपके state का supreme leader आता है. So rather not the supreme leader, but the chief minister is an alumni from your institution itself. Mamta Didi studied in Shikshayatan. Can these kind and form of leaders be identified at the teenage within the school? अगर वो हो सकते हैं तो कैसे? Any idea that you can give to other schools?
Yes, you see, even Mamta Didi, even Ishrat J. Aluwalia, if I may mention, and there are many such people, who are holding leadership program. Now, we are basically a woman-dominated, institute, because our whole thing started with, women empowerment, and we give responsibilities to students. If anybody comes with any kind of problems, issues, we say, do you have a solution? Let us look for a solution. You give different ideas, which, as someone was saying, that yes, you give different ideas. We look at those ideas. We use a morning assembly every day to talk about issues, global issues, solving problem, national and regional. And we give these leadership positions, like we have student council, and I'm sure many of the schools have student council. So those council people are also used, to operate as leaders and give them those responsibility. Maybe any program. Today we are going to have a program where probably we'll have 1,000 people coming in. What kind of things are children supposed to do? Whether it is security related matter or whether it is, hosting guests or ushering guests, everything that children are going to solve. They will find out ideas. What I'm trying to say is that children are actually very, very creative. And I've seen them not today or yesterday, but I've been seeing them for the last 15, 16 years, and I've seen them, what they can do is marvelous. What ideas they have. Only thing is that, yes, we have certain constraints when we work. Those things have to be, strategies have to be worked out by educators. So we need to educate them on skilling. We need to educate them on their attitude, their tolerance level, resilience. These are things, value system. And I'm sure most of the schools would be doing that. And please adopt schools. We have adopted schools where we go, send our children, our teachers go there, teach them and see what kind of situation they're facing. We also adopt schools which are, need our help. We take help from schools which are far better off than us, learn from them also. So it's both ways, forward and backward integration that we do. Thank you.
A very good idea that can be replicated across schools. कि आप जितनी भी क्षमता पे या capability पे बैठे हैं उसको share करना शुरू कर दीजिए. Build a small little community that you improve. वो peer sharing थोड़ी सी और बढ़ जाए और थोड़ा next level चली जाए. Let's listen to KK Dave ji. Dave sahab, you come from the higher education space. Are universities really ready to adopt schools? क्या आप अपनी capability schools के साथ share करने की स्थिति में हैं या करना चाहते हैं या are there any plans to do that?
Yes. हम लोगों का काफी, like if you talk about the university role ना, University is playing very great role. And like just recently, we received a letter from the government of Rajasthan, and they asked us to introduce one subject that is known as Anandam. Anandam is a subject where a student gets Anand or not. Like if he's serving the society. Suppose he's helping a blind man crossing the road. Like if he's doing such kind of activities, we give them some marks. And he put in a diary every day. Yes, I have done a great job. I helped poor people. I helped crossing the road of blind men. I helped the victim of accident people. In that way, like if he is putting values every day, he will become a good person. Because like there are 2 or 3 things we have to imbibe in a teenage people. Like one, that he has to follow the national character. National character should be there in all teenagers, because if he knows that what is wrong and what is right, and how can he help for the building of the national character, then only like we can हम सोच सकते हैं कि वो अपने लिए बहुत helpful हो सकता है. So what I personally feel that every teenager should realize that yes, he is living in a country where he should like follow the nationalism. If he is having such kind of nationalism, then he will definitely follow rest of things. Like we talk about Swachh Bharat, it has launched by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the 2014, and every teenagers, they stop. Like sometimes parents do not follow and they throw the kachra kahin bhi fenk dete the. But teenagers realize them that no, Papa, don't do this. This is your restrictions. You put all the like in dustbin. So this kind of things, like if we teenagers, like if we say that yes, parents' role is important, imbibing a lot of values, cultures, everything. But apart from, if you talk about teenagers, they are really very conscious. They are really want to help to the nations. If you talk about climatic changes, Greta Thunberg, if we talk about her, she's not utilizing any meat and like not traveling through the air because it creates pollution. So if every teenagers, if we tell them that this is your responsibility and don't follow such kind of things, I think we may achieve whatever we are thinking about it.
I think a redefinition of the happiness curriculum, kahin na kahin Anandam, and uske baad mein unpe the national character build karna ki bacche work towards a common cause. Atul ji, your closing thoughts on the topic today? कि हमने क्रिएटिविटी को आइसोलेट कर लिया, हम उनको सपोर्ट करने को तैयार है, बैंडविड्थ भी कहीं ना कहीं बन रही है. व्हाट्स द पेरेंट्स पर्सपेक्टिव ऑन इट, एंड रादर एक थोड़ा सा फाइनेंस पर्सपेक्टिव, क्योंकि फाइनेंशियल लिटरेसी इंडिया में नहीं है, हमें वो पढ़ाया नहीं जाता. इट्स नॉट अ पार्ट ऑफ द करिकुलम.
I somewhere agree with what during the course Vipul mentioned, that schools should try and have innovation led or try and bring entrepreneurship within the kids, and that's one of the way also to solve a lot of problems, because when you lead it towards entrepreneurship, you get better and better ability to solve problems. Now one way of doing that is probably schools or colleges. Higher education, I think they do normally, but if schools also implement during the vacation period, if kids are asked to do at least 2 weeks of internship somewhere locally, okay, you have 3 probably vacations in India. At least you have your winter break, you have your summer break, and then you have a mini break in Diwali, and even if one of them is utilized for the duration of 5th standard to 12th standard for 7 years, and you do 7 to 14 weeks over that 7 years in different parts, you not only harness their innovation and their ability to think, but also to bring a lot of problem solving techniques within them, which probably a classroom cannot help, because it's the environment which will give you a lot of problem statements and also solutions to that. And I think probably if the schools can emphasize and implement that, that's something which will be very great.
So we are nearly at the conclusion of this talk. थोड़ा सा बच्चों को एजेंसी दीजिए, थोड़ी सी इंडिपेंडेंस दीजिए, कोशिश कीजिए कि ऐसा स्ट्रक्चर बन जाए जिसमें they get the chance to experiment and do something hands on. वो अगर बार बार वो चांस आप उसे बना के देंगे तो वो अच्छा होगा. बिहेवियरल चेंज जो आपको समाज में चाहिए, उसके लिए आपको लोगों को इन्वॉल्व करना होगा, कम्युनिकेशन बहुत स्तर पे ले जाना होगा. इट हैज टू गो टू द पेरेंट, इट हैज टू गो टू द टीचर, एंड इतना लेवल ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन, इतने लेवल्स पे कम्युनिकेशन करने के लिए आई थिंक the school now needs to become a little more upgraded in the sense of changing the community around you. वो empathy, वो SDGs को follow करना, क्योंकि the kind of world that we all want, we don't teach the teens to be like that. हम बिना पढ़ाए उनसे एक ऐसी दुनिया expect करते हैं जो हम पढ़ के या अपने सपनों में देखते हैं. Let's start sharing our dreams with our children so that they can at least make it a reality at some point of time. साल भर पहले we thought, let's try to make something that gives opportunity to every single teenager that if he can solve a problem, let's empower him. कोई तरीका ऐसा ढूंढा जाए जिससे उस बच्चे तक किसी न किसी फॉर्म की ताकत पहुंच पाए या पावर या रिसोर्स पहुंच पाए. And that's where the idea of the World Teen Parliament was born. हम कोशिश कर रहे हैं to build an organization of teenagers from across the world who can change the world for good. And a lot of you have been supporting us in building the World Teen Parliament. Don't let this energy, creativity, innovation go to a waste because we are prejudiced or experienced in our approach. Thank you so much, everyone, for being a part of the Blub World Web Talks 171st episode. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, and if you want to attend the future sessions, you can open your audio, say a big yes, and thank you so much, everyone, for taking up this time on this weekend, on this, so early in the morning. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, all the guests. Thank you.